Hello, my name's Gav Cross. I'm a storyteller, and tonight I'm going to be reading, and I read it live on Twitch and TikTok, from the St. Michael collection, 65 Great Tales of the Supernatural. And this story is called Travelling Light by Bernard Taylor. But you said you'd be arriving tomorrow. The woman behind the reception desk looked more and more flustered and bewildered. Gideon turned to the stranger who stood nearby, shrugged helplessly, gave an ironic grin, then turned back to the woman. She looked at him anxiously through her thick-lensed spectacles. "No," said Gideon patiently. "I wrote to say I would be getting here today. My wife would be arriving tomorrow, but I'd be here today. I told you. I thought I made it perfectly clear." His voice trailed off in the face of her helpless, wide-eyed inadequacy. "I'm sorry," she murmured. She seemed almost on the point of tears. "I really am sorry. I don't know how there came to be such a mix-up. And there's nothing at all available for tonight." At these last words, the stranger took an anxious step forward, opening his mouth to speak. Quickly, the woman forestalled him. "Oh, we've got your room, Mr. Travers." The man sighed, smiled, relaxing. The little woman went on. "Though it seems they've given you a double room instead of the single you booked." Weakly, she smiled away any inefficiency. "Of course, we won't charge you the full rate." Gideon was stooping, picking up his suitcases. Now he'd have to start searching the hotels in the area. It was a bloody nuisance. And then the woman spoke again, her voice bright with inspiration. "The room does have 2 beds in it." Her suggestion hung in the air. She looked eagerly from one man to the other. Travers at once took up the idea. He spoke for the first time, his voice, with its strong Scottish accent, taking Gideon by surprise. "Now, that's something to consider," he said. He turned to Gideon. "You'd be most welcome to share. After all, it's only for a night. And I certainly don't mind." Relief swept over Gideon. He beamed at the older man. "It's very kind of you. Are you quite sure?" "Perfectly." Travers gave him a gap-toothed smile. "I'm only too glad to help." A little while later, up in the room, Gideon sat on the edge of his bed, clipping his fingernails and waiting for Travers to finish in the bathroom. Carefully, he placed the nail parings in a nearby ashtray. Already from the bedside table, Beth smiled at him from the narrow leather frame of her photograph. Tomorrow, Gideon thought. Tomorrow. Travers had left the bathroom door open, and now as Gideon moved, he could see the other man as he stood at the wash basin, a hoto towel around his naked waist. He was shaving with an old-fashioned cutthroat razor. Gideon watched, admiring the dexterity with which he handled the cruel-looking instrument. "It's years since I saw anyone using one of those," Gideon said, "outside the barber's." "You can't beat it," Travers said. Neatly he skimmed the blade over his prominent Adam's apple. "It does the best job, by far." Gideon said, grimacing, "It makes me think of those terrible murders that have been going on. The wife slayings." Travers said, "Yes, very strange business." "Just imagine," Gideon said. 7 killings, all practically identical in pattern, all carried out in full view of reliable witnesses, and in each case by the victim's husband." He shuddered. "It's like some awful disease. Terrifying thought," he shuddered. "Imagine 7 of them." "You're wrong," Travers said. 8. There was another one this morning." He carefully circumnavigated a large wart on his chin, just like all the others. Her throat was cut from ear to ear. Head almost severed from the body. Took place in the street this time. Brighton. Husband arrested again. There were plenty of witnesses, as usual. Gideon continued to watch, as with sensitive fingers. Travers tested the smoothness of his jaw. He was not a particularly attractive specimen, Gideon thought. The man's skin was unusually pallid, as though it was never exposed to the sun. He had a protected, preserved look about it. Over the white flesh of his chest grew a mat of short, spiky hair, like his eyebrows, eyelashes, and the hair on his head, all of a light, sandy redness. And then suddenly Gideon was aware of Travers' pale eyes fixed on him. Embarrassed, he looked away. "So, your wife's joining you tomorrow?" Travers said. "Yes," Gideon nodded happily. He and Beth had been apart for 3 months now, and these days seemed never ending. "I'm doing this course," he explained when Travers asked the reason for their separation. "It's not over yet, but at least we thought we could spend the holiday together in a nice place." "You sound as if you're pretty close," Travers said. "We are." Gideon thought of Beth, pictured her lovingly, her warm, soft features, her bright, clear blue eyes. Marrying her had been the best thing he had ever done. All pride, he shrugged and smiled. "She's great." "Well, that's good," Travers said. "Nice to hear." He shook his razor dry and slipped it back in its case. "Save me shaving in the morning," he said. "I'm not so fussy." He put the razor case into a plastic toilet bag. "You people go around with loads of suitcases." "I believe in travelling light." He came to the doorway, paused, his hand on the light switch. "You want to come in here?" "Yes," Gideon rose from the bed. "I think I'll have a shower." With the bathroom door closed behind him, Gideon stripped and stood before the mirror. Unlike Travers, he had a handsome body, tanned golden brown by the sun. His hair grew thick and richly black in its darkness, contrasting with the whiteness of his smile. And today there was reason to smile. Tomorrow he would see Beth again. Later, when he emerged from the bathroom, he found Travers lying back, smoking a cigarette. Gideon lay down on his own bed, a toweling robe around him. "God, I'm tired," he said. "All that travelling. The heat. I think I'll sleep for a while." "What time are you expecting your wife?" Travers asked. He was studying the small photograph of Beth. "Early." "At 10, tomorrow morning," Gideon said. Somehow he resented Travers handling the framed picture. He watched him anxiously. "She's very pretty." "Yes." "Are you meeting her at the station?" "No. Here, down in the foyer. She wasn't sure which train she'd manage, so it was her idea." With some relief, he watched as Travers replaced the photograph on the bedside table. He yawned. "You do seem somewhat tired." "Yes," Gideon nodded, yawning again. He turned, smiling, stretching out full length on the bed. 10 minutes later, he was asleep. When Travers leaned over him to clip from his head a lock of hair, Gideon almost awoke. For a moment he stirred uneasily, a frown increasing the smoothness of his tanned forehead. His mouth opened slightly in a silent, unknowing protest, and then he sank again, back into slumber. Travers, standing above him, held the lock of hair in his hand. He added it to the small collection of nail parings he had taken from the ashtray. He smiled. It would be quite enough. In the morning, when Gideon awoke, Travers was still asleep. The shape of him was just visible in the dim daylight as he lay bundled up under the bedclothes. Moving to the bathroom, Gideon turned on the water to wash. He felt odd, as if he were suffering from a hangover. But that couldn't be. He had nothing to drink last night. The hot water gushed from the tap, clouding the glass. Yawning, Gideon switched on the light and rubbed a clear circle on the glass. Then his heart turned over. He looked at his white skin and short, sandy red hair that grew on his head and chest. He opened his mouth in a short cry of fear and horror and saw that 2 front teeth were missing. The hand that leapt to his face felt the ugly wart that stood out on his chin. Gasping for breath, he leaned over the basin, clutching at the rim for support. Dimly from the bedroom came the sounds of Travers stirring. After long moments he came into view. Gideon raised his pale eyes and looked at him through sandy eyelashes, and he saw the dark waving hair, the smooth tanned cheek that Beth had so often kissed. Travers smiled at him, showing white even teeth. "Don't look like that," he said. It won't be for long. Then he spoke with Gideon's own voice. Gideon continued to stare, eyes wide with horror, uncomprehending and yet comprehending. Travers said, with a note of impatience, "You're not going to stand there all day, are you?" "Oh, God," Gideon said, and spoke with a Scottish accent. "Oh, God! Oh, God! Oh, God!" Travers smiled again. His cheek dimpled in the way that Beth had always loved. "Come on," he said. "Time's getting on, and I've got an appointment at 10. He opened the toilet bag and took from it the razor case. Lifting out the razor, he tested on his thumb the keenness of the shining blade. "Come on," he said. "I've got to meet a lady. Down in the foyer." He gave Gideon a grotesque wink. "I mustn't keep her waiting." Travelling Light by Bernard Taylor, from 65 Great Tales of the Supernatural. Crikey.